are Mr. Charles Buncher, but I'm going to call him Chuck, and she, her, hers, Katherine, is it Cowan?
Cowan.
Catherine, Catherine, and Mr. Eddie Henderson. And I'm going to let him, because he's got such a varied background, but these are some of the key points here. He's from a farm, grew up in a farm in Illinois and was drafted in the military. He's worked for a number of organizations and he's done many, many travels, lots of interesting stories, is a member of, I think, every museum in the city and goes to every theatrical performance. This is Chuck on one of his many trips. Chuck, where was this?
That was my 80th birthday a year and a half ago. I flew to Dubai, the Arab Emirates, and from there we cruised to Oman, over to India, and then down to Sri Lanka and Colombo, the capital. And then we were told we couldn't go on to Thailand and Singapore because of the virus, the pandemic. So they gave us $200 each, and we ended up going back to the Martini Bar as we sailed back to Dubai. So that was my 80th birthday.
Awesome.
Wow.
This is my first grade. I'm in the front there, and to your right
Is this yours? Is this you in the front?
That's me in the front.
Okay.
At first grade, and to the right is Carol Newberger, and to the left is Marilyn Ball. I had the hots for Carol because her father worked in town, and I was on the farm, and so was Marilyn's father on the farm. So I had no use for the farm. I wanted to be in the big city. And so the first 8 years I went to a one-room school, and I think that grounded me in English, math, geography, and everything else, because it was such a wonderful place to be in, because you got to hear every class. Even though I was in first grade, you'd hear the 8th grade geography class or the math class or something else. So it was a wonderful, wonderful way to grow up in a one-room school. So anyway, I think you might find this interesting. People talk about when you found out you were gay. And when I was 9 years old on the farm, I was told that I couldn't go into my sister's bedroom. She's 8 years older than I am. So I was 9 and she was 17. So I thought, well, nobody's around. I'm going to go into her bedroom and see what's going on. Well, I looked in there and it was kind of, kind of girly. And I thought, yeah, whatever. And then there was a box under the bed. And I said, oh. So I looked, it was Hollywood magazines. I said, woo. Mm-hmm. So I opened it up and looked, and there was Ava Gardner with a low-cut black dress. And I said, she is really, really beautiful. Oh my God. So I turned a few more pages. Now I'm 9 years old and I see Alan Ladd with his shirt off. And I said, ooh. Really? And of course, I never heard the word gay or anything except in the movies when they always said it in the 40s and 30s. It was a gay old time they had, but we never heard homosexual or gay or anything else. So I always had to laugh because years later, Katherine Hepburn said that gays became that way because they went to the big city and it was so crowded, or else you hated your mother or your father or this or that. And none of that was true. You just were gay or you weren't gay. It had nothing to do with anybody else around you that much, as far as I'm concerned. So, so that was my first experience of realizing that I probably was more interested in the male population than the women. Although I did enjoy women, even to this day, where I travel with a lot of women and enjoy a lot of women's company. So it's just interesting how life goes on. So here I am in 1963. I was working in Rockford at a huge computer company. And I got my first job, my stepmother got me a job in town when I was 19. And I was sent to Chicago to wire boards for IBM tabulating machines and punch cards and things. And that started my career of 60 years in the computer industry because of my stepmother. And in the 60s, they had a big thing about the missile crisis, and also in Cuba and the beginning of the Vietnam War. And I came home and there was a letter, you've been drafted. And I said, crap, So off I went, and I was in about 800 men. They pushed us through really fast, and I was in the first platoon. I was top shot, highest IQ, the top 10 across country. They wanted me to go into officers training, but I decided I wasn't sure if I wanted to, and I secretly found out I was being sent to San Francisco to run the computer center at the Presidio. So who wanted to be a second lieutenant when I could come to San Francisco? And from there, that's where I started going to all the gay bars when I was 25, just before I ended my career. I went to Polk Street to Cloud 7. I went to 2 till 2 and the Web, and then downtown was the Trap and the Blue and Gold and the Adult Club, and everything was just open all over. I even went over to On the Levee, which was interesting because there was an entertainer on Sunday, and he had a piano and an organ, and he was sitting on a chair playing Easter Bonnet, and he had a birdcage on his head with a canary flying around. And I said, "You're not in Kansas anymore, Chuck." So
He literally
all the
had
bars.
Yeah.
he literally had a live
Yeah, so
bird on his head.
What?
He literally had a live bird in a cage on his head.
Oh, he had a canary, yellow canary in his head, his thing, David Kelsey. So I got to know David Kelsey. I'd see him at parties around the city and stuff. And he'd go to Hawaii even and play there. And he always laughed because he said he told them they had to. So, and then, of course, I was in the middle of all the flower children on Haight Street. And I think she has a picture of Jose. And Jose was a Latino guy. And he used to go over to the bar on 8th Street, Romeo's. And on Sunday, everybody and their mother would go there for brunch. Straight, gay, bi, it didn't matter. And he had a little corner where he performed, and he'd come out in drag as Carmen, put the record on and do the entire Carmen opera with his fan and everything and dance around and everything and stuff. And he used to cruise me. And I didn't like anybody in drag to cruise me. And about 20 years ago, I'm on the bus on Market, going down Market Street to the Ferry Building, and he was across from me, but of course, Jose, and he's looking at my crotch. And I said, "You've got a lot of nerve looking at me. You did this 40 years ago on 8th Street." And he says, "Don't you dare say that to anybody. They'll know how old I am." Oh, and there was, I'll tell you this is funny. There was another bar on Broadway next to Pinocchio's, and it had tables with phones, and then they had cutouts in the walls where you could sit there and kind of lounge in a chair, and there was a little table with a phone, and you could get on the phone and you look at the table and say, "Oh, table 9. Hi, what are you doing?" And one night I'm sitting there, phone rings, pick it up, and I said, "Hello." And this gal, beautiful woman, was sitting at the table, and she says, "You're really hot." And I said, "So are you." And she says, "Well," she says, "I'm getting divorced. I'm going to Vegas. Do you want to go and drive me to Vegas? And then we'll have some fun on the side." And I said, "Uh-oh, I don't think this is going to work out too well. I wouldn't mind doing the ride, but I don't want to ride her." So, so that was the end of that. But that was just so funny. We had so many places in the 60s, 70s, and 80s like that you could go in and do things. And it was just fantastic. And then, of course, there was the Gilded Cage. That was after hours, and all the big drag queens that even became famous and went to Vegas and stuff, they would do shows after 2 o'clock, and we would go in there, and there was people from ACT and from Best of Broadway, because after they got through playing, they would go in there, and then there was pilots and stewardesses from United who were over at the Hilton Hotel, and they would come in, so we got to meet all those people and stuff, and just had a really, really wonderful time. And then I did the first radio broadcast of the Gay Parade. That's like 38 years ago, I guess. And it was broadcast on pirate radio stations all around England and Australia, different places around the world. And I got to interview senators and everybody and their mother. And I spent about 3 months doing that for this, the day that we did the radio reporting. So I have a lot of history, and then of course Castro opened up, and I moved to the top of Twin Peaks where I bought a condo up there. So for about, I guess, 15, 18 years, I was in Castro a lot of the time because Polk Street had really fallen away, and so had the Tenderloin area down there. So a lot of the bars had closed up. So things continued on though, and we had a lot of fun with what was going on Castro also. So I really had a full, wonderful life. And, you know, I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about some of the things that happened to me.
Oh, yes. Does anyone have a question for Chuck?
What year did you move to San Francisco?
Well, I was drafted in '63. So the fall of '63, they flew me out to San Francisco. So that was 1963.
Thank you.
Was going to the bars in the Tenderloin back in the day dangerous? Like if you were caught out, would that have been?
I've been to every bar in the city every day and night, 24 hours a day. From Friday night till Sunday night, I'd be out, never go home. And I never once was hassled by the police or anybody.
Wow.
The only ones that were hassled were some of the drag queens. They would go out after the bars closed, and then they would go to Compton's or different places, and they'd scream and carry on and stuff. And of course, the police were all Irish, and that was a no-no. So the police always got their whiteys in a knot, and then they would go after the drag queen. But I think the drag kind of enjoyed it in a way almost, because they would just go out purposely and do it. So yeah, except for that, I never heard of anybody being hassled in any bar in San Francisco all the time I went out.
When was the first radio broadcast of the Pride Parade?
Oh gosh, that's on my website. It was like 40 years ago, 38 years ago, after it was just on a couple of years.
Okay.
A friend of mine,
Early
80s?
Early 80s?
I think it was around 80s, 70s, 80s.
I think it was
Yeah.
78, Chuck. It was 78 was the first SF Pride parade.
No, I'm
Yeah, it was
sorry. I'll
years after.
correct you on that.
Okay, that's all right. I got that from another source, so let's see.
Yeah, I was at the Pride Parade in 1975 here.
Okay, awesome.
So I know that they were going
On my
on.
website, it's on my
78,
website. I've got a whole big web page on my website as to the day it was that we did that.
I see.
So I
Okay.
can't remember the date.
Yeah, 78 was the year of the Briggs Initiative in California. So that's why I was trying to frame it in that context. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next panelist is going to be Katherine.
Okay.
Katherine has many hats, and she's gone through a whole variety of different areas in her life, including being a mother and living in the Castro, working with the SPAR Center in Marin, and enjoying every bit of the way. Katherine,
Yeah.
you want me to show first slide? There we go.
It's really good to be here. Nice to meet you all, even on Zoom. And a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Gloria, for the invitation. So this is a picture of Dykes on Bikes. I am happy to say I did it one time. Before I became more of an activist, I ended up buying my then girlfriend a motorcycle, and then we rode in Dykes on Bikes once.
Nice.
I was not the brave girl to take off my shirt or any of that stuff, but I had a blast. And the moment that I remember in the time I rode in this was when the woman said, when everybody's at the top of Castro going to go down Market, at that time was the route. And she said, "All right, women, start your engines." And then 1,500 bikes started. And I was like, oh my God, it was such an amazing feeling of solidarity in being raised as a woman in a patriarchy. It was just such an amazing feeling of like, oh my God, it's like there's not a man on a bike in anywhere near this place. So that was really just a tremendous, wonderful, fun moment in time. and more wonderful pride experiences. I marched in the very first Dyke March, which wasn't until 793 or something. And the first Dyke March. And at that point, my daughter had been born in 91. So I just tossed her in a stroller and we did the first Dyke March. And that was another one of those quintessential moments in that I remember the feeling of going down Market. It felt like an ancient snake going down Market, and it was all women, and it was just powerful. It was a very powerful moment to sort of remember what it was like to be in a woman's society. It was just for a moment, but you know you can remember those things and carry them with you. And more marvelous pride stuff. So I think that the SF Pride Parade, I got more involved in it in the 90s. And I just have wonderful moments. I'm still, you know, pining after doing it this year. So, you know, but all in good time. We'll get back out on the streets again. So it's a beautiful moment where you see so many people from so many cultures just being out. It's beautiful.
Does anyone want to comment on their experience in the Pride Parade?
Well, I'll kind of comment on mine, especially when you showed the picture of Harvey Milk. That is absolutely intensely sketched in my mind. And,
Harvey,
you know, he was the first openly gay elected official in California. And he was known as the mayor of Castro when he became the District 8 supervisor. George Moscone was called the people's mayor. And when Harvey Milk was assassinated by Dan White, as well as Mayor Moscone, Dianne Feinstein became the first woman mayor in the USA. And I'm still verklempt about the whole thing. And what sparked it was Dan White was served a lenient sentence, and we took to the streets, we took to the nights, and it was called the White Night Riots.
oh, bless the baby.
And that's why I march.
Yeah. And that's a tremendously important point, Eddie. I was living in Southern California during the time Harvey was elected and here, and he changed things. And he was a good person. And so I appreciate that you were there in those moments.
I came to San Francisco in 1975. And in 1975, the Gay Freedom Day was celebrated by a ragtag group of radicals who marched through the financial district on a Sunday morning, hearing hand lids echo against all of the high rises in the deserted financial district. We were then bused to what is now Hellman's Hollow or Marks Meadows in Golden Gate Park, where there was a large party with thousands of people all afternoon. The headliner that year was a drag queen by the name of Pearl, who did the Janis Joplin routine. But the most amazing thing about it, and one that I will never forget, is that although this whole area was packed shoulder to shoulder with people, clothing was optional, there was no violence. And at the end of the festivities, people stuck around to pick up every single piece of trash in the entire area. And when we left, one could never have known that thousands of people had partied there all afternoon.
Nice.
It was a very different time in San Francisco.
Mhm.
So that was my first Pride Parade experience. So that was before the time of corporate sponsorships and floats and all of the mega parade that we now know. It was really a bunch of radicals who were trying to claim the day and claim a freedom in the United States that was non-existent. So
Really good point that Pride parades started out as protest marches.
absolutely.
And that we lost the flavor of that as corporate moved in.
Yep.
And it was disheartening. However, when you look at the history of LGBT movement, you know, it was always protest parades, the beginning, and often led by drag queens and people who are targeted by the police for raids and everything. And was it Marsha P. Johnson? I want my gay rights now. And, you know, these things, this was a protest. It wasn't a party. It's become this massive party where people the kids don't even remember the history. So, yeah, they claimed it back, didn't they, in 2019? And Northern or something, she was really involved in trying to change the feeling of the Pride Parade back to a protest march. And I was there, and it did feel like it felt more like in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Another happy moment here.
Yes, I advocated for, of course, gay marriage rights, and this was a great movement, a great moment when these two, who had been so out and so visible and so together so long, got married. I did shed a tear. I wasn't there, but I did see it on the TV. But you know, it was a tremendous moment for them and a very, very beautiful moment.
Thank you. Oh, I saw Trish in the audience. Are you still there, Trish? Did she leave us?
Sorry, a minute or two.
I was
She had
just
it.
going to interject. You mentioned about the Pride Parade. After the parade on the weekend, I would go on Monday through the Civic Center up to the Senior Center, and there wasn't a piece of paper, anything. It's the cleanest after party or after parade in the city every year. So it's up to the time we had the last one. That still was happening. Civic Center never looked as good after during the year.
Mhm.
So
But Trish, you had a nice event happen when these gay marriages were going on. What did you do?
oh, when in 2004, when Newsom started to have the permits and everything, as I walked through the Civic Center, I walked past City Hall and there was a line of people and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and they were getting their marriage license, and there wasn't a nicer feeling around City Hall that I had ever experienced. So on the days of farmers market, we'd go over and get flowers and stuff and hand them out when they were in the line waiting to get their license and get married. It was lovely energy.
Thank you. Katherine, who is this?
So this is my daughter, Tashi. She's now 29 years old. And I kept her marching with me, and I marched a lot when all through her first 10 years of life. So I was involved in a group called the Lesbian and Gay Parents Association out of San Francisco, and we led about 250 trainings, changed policies. At that time, San Francisco Unified District would not talk about gay people with kids, so we went in and put one of our tough girls on the Human Rights Commission, and we changed policies. So in San Francisco, it's now mandated since those days that you have got to talk about gay people and their children and their families. So this is my family. This is my Tashi. And So she loved the parade. And I used to say to her in the stroller while we're going down Market, see, honey, this 1.5 million people are cheering for you because you're brave enough to have me as your mom.
Awesome.
So, and in those years, we could throw hard candy at the crowd. And so I'd hand her all this candy and I'd stroll her up to the crowd. She'd throw the candy. She loved it. So as she grew up, she called herself heterosexual. So as she grew up, she called herself heteroflexible. And I just love that word. But she would take her friends over the years to the San Francisco Pride because she says, oh my God, if you haven't experienced this, you haven't experienced San Francisco. And so she took tons of people of her friends to Pride through the years after she grew up and could go whenever she wanted to. But yeah, it was a good way to raise her because she's now been exposed to all kinds of people. She can handle a 1.5 million people crowd. I don't worry about her in public at all. And so that's really great. And she actually just recently moved to San Francisco and is having her period in the city now. So yeah, it's been a good road. I think she gave me more strength. Having a child when I did, I raised her as a single parent the whole way. I tried to have girlfriends when she was younger, but a lot of women aren't tolerant of a woman with a kid. So, I raised her mostly alone, and she's a terrific girl and gave me tremendous amount of grounding and purpose and motivation to not be to be out as a lesbian parent, to say, no, I'm not a straight girl who married a guy for 20 years and got a kid. No, I'm a lesbian woman who had a bi moment and got a kid. And so that's how my life went, because I had gone through an unhealthy relationship with a woman that was abusive. And so as I was pulling out of that, I briefly dated Toshi's dad, got the kid, and said, you'll know your kid, but no, you can't move in. You got to go. So my life was a little different as a parent than some women, with lesbian women that have children. So I just got very fortunate as I was able to maintain my independence, my being out as a lesbian mom. I took the trainings that we did with the Lesbian Gay Parents Association. I took it into every school that my daughter was in. And we just tried to change curriculum and open things up to saying, look, there's people out there that have children that are not straight, and I'm one of them. So, we really tried to make things better for our kids, really, was what we were attempting to do.
Crystal, do you want to comment on being a parent?
Katherine, that story just was amazing, warmed my heart. My wife and I have a 2.5-year-old, and God, just one story. Yesterday, my daycare, or maybe it was Monday or Tuesday, my daycare teacher for my little guy called me and said, I need to chat. And I go, okay. And she goes, we're all making Father's Day cards, and I don't know what to do. Oh, let me go on video. It turned into a beautiful moment because I got to share with her, well, let's talk through it. I have no idea, right? We've never come across a Father's Day, but just to be able to have a teaching moment with his daycare provider about, what to do, what to say. We ended up deciding just have him make a card for his grandpa. But I just it felt so good to be asked that question. And it felt so nice to be able to educate someone and just really be seen, because she could have done anything, had him draw a picture or something. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. We haven't, because he's so young, we haven't had the conversation of having a dad and what that means. And he knows he has a mommy and a mama, mm-hmm. But it feels wonderful to have a child. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just loving looking at this picture of you two. It's such a beautiful thing.
This was just Mother's Day just passed in the city.
Awesome. Yeah.
One of the ways we used to handle that when they'd say Father's Day and there's no mythical father. So there's two moms, is that's your teachable moment in the facility that your kid is in, to bring picture books of different kinds of families. There are families with two moms, there's families with a mom and a dad, there's families with two dads. There's a lot of material out there now. We used to have, I got a $5,000 grant and got all kinds of books into the school that she was in years ago. So there are all kinds of books that you can bring actually to your place when you're ready to say, yes, well, he's got two moms.
Mm-hmm.
End of story.
I love that idea. Yeah.
And then it sort of helps him before he can really conceptualize it, that yes, the pictures of his kind of family are up on the wall with the rest of them.
I love that.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks, Gloria.
Sure.
Can I just add the quote
Sure.
of the day so far is having a bye moment.
Go ahead.
That was hilarious. Thank you for that, Katherine.
Sure. I've been talking in my new job with the Spa Center to all these seniors, and a lot of women were married to men for 20, 25 years that were unhappily, and then, have their kids. And I said, yeah, well, my story's a little different.
Okay, moving on to a bar scene.
Bars, yes. Amelia's was a wonderful spot. I used to love to go in there. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that it's a human need to gather. And we all need to gather amongst people that are like ourselves. And so the bar scene, the ballroom scene, all these scenes that came out of the need to gather. And so it was really important to all of our states of mind to be able to have somewhere to go. And Chuck had the wonderful experience of, being in the city from the early 60s on, when things started to develop like that. But I remember being in Amelia's and just feeling like, oh, great, I can just come here, and it was like a relief to be able to gather in bars. It wasn't, for me, then I was with a partner at that time, so I wasn't shopping for a lover or anything, but I just loved being in there, to be able to just feel like I was in a gathering place that I was comfortable. And that was nice, extremely important for the human psyche to feel from whomever you are, that gathering is really crucial.
I've often equated the bar scene within the gay and lesbian culture as an equivalent to what the Black church is to the Black community. It's a meeting place. It's a support network that keeps that community together and thriving. So I see definite comparisons there.
Really good point. Yes. And my daughter is biracial, and I often, in earlier days, even before I was a mom, was often just fall into the Black Baptist churches, and they were so nice to me, like, oh, honey, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, okay. And so, I went there for the energy, for the music, for the feeling there. So I know what you mean. There's a solidarity within the Black church scene that's really strong and really beautiful. The Castro. I love the Castro. So it's so interesting that Chuck pointed out that when he lived over in Pacific Heights, and that before the Castro was back in the day a bit of a ghetto. And I guess that it drew people that were different. I lived in, just up that block right there in 1970. And my neighbors were Sylvester and the Coquettes. Let's just say that this little 18-year-old girl got a real education as to what true performers were. And Sylvester was a dear soul, and he was kind to people who were just wanting to know, wow, where do I get to see more of you? And I remember bringing straight people, gay people, lesbian people, any kind of people to his shows because he was such a master entertainer. And so, yeah, I was very positively influenced by living in the Castro at that time, and just getting a beautiful exposure to the flamboyant people of that era. And they gave me confidence because I had been a really shy girl as a younger person, and it was like they infused confidence in me because they were so willing to be out. And they were targeted. All of them were targeted by the cops and by police raids, but they still were out, and they were still flamboyant, and they would still invite us to all their shows. So, you know, that was a brand of courage that I was really amazed with and really loved. Oh, so the Castro, Gloria had mentioned to me, let's see, a while back at the Castro Theater, this was before COVID, some years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, I see this advertisement for a sing-along West Side Story with Rita Moreno present at the Castro Theater. And I just went, oh my God, I have to go. And my daughter teasingly says, oh, Mom, that's so gay. I said, I know. I said, nobody's going to stop me. I don't need anybody to go with me. I got to go. Because as a kid, West Side Story was a really important movie to me, right? And so I went, and I heard Rita Moreno was just fabulous. She told us stories about it took 41 takes to get that shot where she gets hoisted to his shoulder in the dance.
Oh, wow.
Because it was 95 degrees in New York and they were all sweating bullets, and she was in satin, and so she kept sliding off his shoulder. So they had to do the take 41 times to be able to get it. So she was just charming and marvelous, and we sang along, and I sang at the top of my lungs. It was so much fun. And the girls next to me weren't ready for my enthusiasm, but I just had such a great time. And then when Rita Moreno came up the aisle as she was leaving, I put my hand out like she was a guru and just leaned out and said, please touch my hand, Rita Moreno. And she grabbed my hand and squeezed it. She knew I was an old fan.
You might be interested. The other night, she was on TV on a talk show. She's 89 years old. She is producing Spielberg's new West Side Story, and it's going to open December 11th or 12th, and that's her 90th birthday. And she looked 60, danced all around the desks and stuff, and plopped herself down. And she talked all about making the movie and everything, and how her life had changed, and she got all of the 4 big awards plus a Peabody. So she actually has won 5 of the awards. But she was on the other night, and I saw her also over there at the theater, the sing-along. So,
you did? Oh, God, it was great.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
And there's a documentary that just came out about her.
Yeah.
What is the girl? There's something, I can't remember exactly the title. I know, the girl that just went for it. And so there's a documentary, and so that's cool. You're seeing her interviewed, and she's producing other stuff. That's just wonderful.
That documentary is going to be at the Landmark Theaters, and Rita Moreno was so kind. She was she went to one of our fundraisers for the San Francisco Senior Center.
Good for her.
Thank you.
And Katherine, you mentioned really quickly the ballroom scene. There's a great show on Netflix called Pose, as in strike a pose.
Oh, yeah.
It really goes into the scene in the late 70s, early 80s.
It does. And one of the things that was I had to give a talk on LGBT history at a facility just recently, and I rented this whole series called Pride on FX, and you know, they talked about all that whole history. And
Oh no, what happened?
You froze that.
It looks like her internet got a little spotty for a second
Oh,
there.
she's froze. Okay, well, we'll come back to Katherine. Eddie.
Moses. And that was
Catherine,
really amazing to me.
Okay, great.
Here she-
Catherine, go
she's
ahead,
back.
Catherine.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. So now we have Eddie Henderson. He's our next panelist.
Yay!
And he comes from Oklahoma. He's retired, but I don't think he's retired. He is so busy creating a social life, and he had so many other as well, had different positions in his life. Eddie. And
Hello, everyone. I want to make a couple of comments, especially about Catherine's presentation. I was a little bit disappointed, I guess I would say, this morning when I heard that the Supreme Court has sided with the Catholic organization that is going to deprive same-sex couples from adopting. And we still got work to do. We clearly have work to do. That was upsetting to me. And also, though, I want to talk about Sylvester for a second. I have drawn so many pictures of Sylvester, posters. I'm obsessed by Sylvester. He was the queen of discotheque. He was the originator of discotheque. You know, he doesn't get enough props for that. And, you know, he also left us due to AIDS in the late 90s. And what can I say? I've also been, I've had many loves in my life, but the love of my life died in my arms 25 years ago or so now. Died of AIDS, and I didn't think I'd ever get over it. I think I'm finally kind of getting over it because I'm feeling like my old self, thanks to UCSF, healthcare, and that kind of thing. But I'm also very proud this year of what has happened. The AIDS Memorial in Golden Gate Park is one of the most solemn, amazing places I've ever been to in my life. I'm so happy to live in San Francisco. They've put a new gong in there this year, memorializing the onset of AIDS, which was first called GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency. We have taken it on the chin. The band played on, and we kept swimming as the Titanic sank. And I'm sorry. I'm proud. I'm loud. And I'm going to die this way if I have to.
thanks, Eddie.
We love you, Eddie.
Now, this is City Light Bookstore. As we were talking about with Chuck and that kind of thing, oh my goodness. City Light Bookstore. Ferlinghetti died at the age of 101 during the pandemic, I guess. You know, I mean, really, City Light Bookstore, woo! It's where Allen Ginsberg, it's where out of the Beat Generation, Kerouac, Ferlinghetti himself, I mean, was all about, you know, obscenity and, you know, fighting against it and freedom and liberty of expression. And, oh my God, who couldn't be proud of San Francisco? Would anybody else like to talk about Ferlinghetti or the City Light Bookstore? I would love to hear your, I was very young when it started, but it was one of the places I went to the first moment I got to San Francisco.
I would add that Lawrence Ferlinghetti later on became a visual artist and maintained an active studio at the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard until the time of his death. So it wasn't that he lived on his laurels of being the champion of free speech and Ginsburg and Kerouac and so forth in the 50s. That man went on, he continued to write, and continued to create until his 101st birthday. So a model to us all, I think.
Well, and this is the Finch Diversity Bears on the end of the Victorian side of the LBGT Beloved Center. You know, I'm absolutely ambivalent, not about the Finch Bears. I guess I'm considered a bear myself. It has so much symbolism to me. My partner, who died in my arms, had a collection of bears. There's so much that these particular representations in the various pride flags meant so much to me. And a young group of protesters, and you know, I'm an old protester myself, big time. And I was part of the ones marching that said, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. And the ones that were saying, let's face it, we're all queer. But frankly, I don't like being called a queer. When I was raised in Oklahoma, it was okay to maybe be a sissy at my young age, but it was not okay to be a queer. You know, and I'm very conflicted about the use of the word. I definitely understand about using that word. And now that I've understood it, because quite frankly, I've been oblivious to a lot of stuff lately, but I had to get a handy guide to flags to let me understand what really queer means in the current vernacular. I mean, I really didn't, I was confused, to be perfectly honest. And I think it's the fact that I'm 70 years old and I can't remember the names of most of these bars that were happening here, there, and everywhere, and drug, sex, and rock and roll, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I now understand that queer basically, more than anything else, means personally questioning your own sexuality and where you really place yourself in society, because we have to live in society somehow. And it's really difficult. It's difficult because, you know, so many of us came from poverty. You know, I certainly did. And was a throwaway gay youth by the time I was 18. And it was, I should have probably left sooner than that, but I was definitely thrown out at that time. And you pull yourselves up by the bootstraps. You know, that is what it is all about for me. And it is the challenge of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in my artistic bravado, I was really upset when there was hate speech applied, and this was absolutely passed over. And I even, you know, I was hesitant, but I even called the police when it was happening. And because they were a protest out there that was saying, honk if you hate Finch. And it was right in front of the center. And I thought, oh, this is the other side, pretending to be almost like, you know, I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I, though, trusted the San Francisco Police Department because it does have this same history as we have. And there are gay police, there are gay, let's call it queer. There are queer police, there are queer fire people, there are queers, if that's the word we're using these days. And, apparently queer is an all-inclusive term from what I can read now. And I'm down with it. I will be included in being a queer, and I will support the beloved LGBT Center.
Oh, God.
Sorry, I accidentally hit a button.
You're recording me?
Eddie, do you want to talk about your
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
poster?
It's communication in our community. I was one of the finalists for Open House had a Pride. What can you say? What can I say? They did a Pride poster contest, and I thought it was, just a normal little thing. And I entered, and I wound up being one of the finalists. And this is this year, of course, I think, is Pride Inside. I don't know if that's the slogan throughout San Francisco this year. I'm a little bit confused because it's from Open House, and Open House is kind of the senior end of the LGBTQ community now, I guess. And I entered this and I did a haiku, and it's called "I Cannot Hide the Pride Inside San Francisco 2021." And I tried to go for, gender equality. I tried to go for, but it's you got to try. That's all we have to do is try. And I think we can solve these problems. And I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. If there is a solution, please. And that is also what we used to say back in my day.
Thank you. Well, going back to a fun time, here's Finocchio's.
Remember it well.
I definitely remember going to Finocchio's. But it's one of those two that I kind of go, this town has changed so much. It's remained the same, but changed so much. I can't even remember where it was located. Was it in the Polk?
Broadway Street.
Broadway. It was Broadway.
Wow. Wow.
Chuck was there.
Yeah,
I know.
There was a gay bath. There was a gay bath down there. Yeah, there was a gay bath down a block from there, and I met Tab Hunter there.
Whoa! Whoa!
Yeah. Up close.
Lucky man.
Luck had nothing to do with it.
Hey. Back in the Castro, there's the Twin Peaks. That's a famous landmark bar.
Yes, it is.
Anybody want to comment on that?
You were there, Chuck. You were there.
Yeah, I went there a few times, but that wasn't the fun bar. The other bars were down closer to 17th or 18th in Castro. Those were the big fun bars. That was a bunch of, every time I went in there, there were older men with younger men, and they had on their little sweaters with their little bow ties. Mm-hmm. And they were like they were 40-year-old preppies with their daddies who were 70 or 80. And I used to go in there.
They were guppies.
Hasn't changed.
Well, no, it's changed now, but this is like 25, 30 years ago. And I said, this is boring. I want to be with the in group.
Yeah.
What about Halloween in the Castro?
Well, I personally think that Halloween in the Castro has turned into quote unquote cosplay, because everybody loves to get dressed up, and especially children. You know, that is what I really love seeing, is that it doesn't really matter who the family makeup is. I mean, you know, unfortunately, little girls seemingly are going to the Little Mermaids and that kind of thing, but they're having their daddies dress up as Little Mermaids too, you know, and they're complying. I mean, you know, my beast of a father, don't get me started on that, but, you know, he would never do that. Never. So I think there's hope.
Yeah. I remember Halloween in the Castro is the best party all year. And it was just no holds barred. All kinds of stuff was going on. And that was before, in the years before, you know, the haters started showing up and the instigators started showing up and causing problems or causing violence. Before those days, I'm telling you, that was the place to be. So much creativity. And it was just so much fun in the earlier days. And now it's like a little dicey because people crash the party and make trouble.
Before the Castro was the place for the Halloween party, it was on Polk Street.
Ooh.
When I first came here. I remember the best costume I ever saw was a diamond necklace. So it was quite memorable.
Wonderful.
Trish, are you still around?
I'm around, yeah.
Yeah, you want to tell them what your memory was of going to the Castro?
Well, with Catherine, what she said about it being the best party and just so much fun, and the children Eddie mentioned and everything. When I came in 1980, I loved Halloween and I loved dressing up. So Gary and I decided to go down to the Castro and celebrate and dress up. And as you indicated, little children early on, they were all around and we were having a great time. And as it got darker, they left, and we were in groups of people and just enjoying ourselves. And all of a sudden they started asking, could we have your picture? Could we take your picture with us? And we didn't know what was going on. And so some of the costumes were beautiful. The guys were all dolled up there. They walked in high heels better than I ever did. I mean, it was, and we couldn't figure it out till we got home, why it was such, we were gravitating to all this. Well, we turned out being naive and not knowing much about the gay culture coming into San Francisco. Well, we found out that the colors were rainbow. Well, this is what our costumes are, rainbow clown costumes, and this is why they wanted to have pictures with us, because we were kind of like the centerpiece, and we didn't even know it till we got home and someone explained to us that, yeah, you were the highlight, kind of. So, and we were included, very inclusive. That was also what I remember. So very good memories.
Does anyone else want to share a memory about Halloween in Castro?
Well, I think when I first went, maybe 600 people there, and it was really fantastic. But then they got 1,000 and then 2,000 people. And then I went up one time and I was like a block from Castro, and there was a barricade across and you had to pay to get in or something for the cleanup. And it was such a mess that I just went back home again. So I never went back again after that.
Oh,
I first came to San Francisco in 2004, and Halloween in the Castro was one of the first things that introduced me to San Francisco. And it was amazing, and everyone was just love and smiles, and it was such an electricity in the air. And I'm like, this is my new city. I have come home, and I just love Halloween in the Castro so much. And it's still kind of happening. If you go to the Castro on Halloween, there's still groups of people in group costumes going along, and the cops are keeping the traffic moving, and it's like, shh, don't tell anybody. we're still having Halloween in the Castro, but it's not official now, and I love it.
Mm,
We'll have to renovate it.
yeah. Okay. So Chuck discovered this is the entrance to the Gangway Bar, which is now closed, but it was one of the oldest bars. It was open for 108 years.
Wow.
Did anyone go here?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I
Pretty
went all the time. Yeah, I lived about 6 blocks away and I went there all the time. But I also want to tell you, there was a bathhouse across from the Hilton Hotel downtown. And it was 3 stories. It had a jacuzzi in the basement and a TV room and a steam room. And then it had a sun deck on the top that looked over the Hilton Hotel. And it was opened in 1895 for the Navy, the military. And it just closed about 20 some years ago. So that had a long run for besides the bar lasting over 100 years, and that baths lasted over 100 years also.
I have a question for Chuck. I was reading in this historical information about our movement, and it said that really the gay men's bar scene happened because of the military that was in like say the 40s, before World War II, and that men would start gathering in bars and created all men bars in the military, and that's where they went. So I thought that was a really interesting piece to remember because it was before my time.
Well, you'll find this interesting. When I was drafted in the Army in '63, my sister's husband, he was drafted in '45 to go to Japan to fight the war. He got on the ship here, and this is from Illinois near Chicago. He came out here, got on the ship, sailed to Tokyo. He got there and the war was over, and he sailed back to Oakland and back home again and got all the benefits for being a veteran. But he told my sister when he heard I was coming out here at the Presidio, he told her, tell Chuck not to go down to the end of Market Street by the ferry building because there's bars down there in the basements and they're the worst place to go to. So she says, yeah, right. As soon as I tell him that's the first place he's going to go. And it was. It was at one market in the basement. It was a huge bar, and all the sailors would go in there. And across next to it was the YMCA, the Embarcadero YMCA, and that thing was full. The first 2 or 3 floors were full of Navy men in there, and of course there was all kinds of goings-ons in the Y there over like for 20 years. It was unbelievable. So yeah, there were gay bars all over, and baths and military were in all of those places. So that's really where they started, I think, the gay bars in San Francisco, down at the end of Market Street.
I think you're
and
right.
also that house over by downtown by the Hilton, because that was here in 1895. So yeah, so lots was going on really underground because it was in the basement.
That's really underground. Thank you. Crystal, do you want to tell us about the next week's program?
Are we ending?
Yes, thanks, Gloria. Actually, I was just pulling up a picture. So next week is our finale of our Proud Voices series. First of all, thanks to everyone who has come out and participated. Next week is our last installment at 1 p.m. And then later that night at 6 p.m., we're going to have a finale drag show. So I'll tell you more about that, but I hope you can join us. It's going to be, just some entertainment for us.
You could have parties in your place, gather around.
Yeah, bring a friend, have a party, throw it up on Zoom, and should be really good. So the party, the show that night is going to be a threesome. So 3 people, they're called 3 Queens Are We. There are a few elder drag queens. They perform all over San Francisco, have for a very long time. There's one Cher impersonator, and I forgot what the other 2, but they're called 3 Queens Are We, next Thursday, which is the 24th at 6 p.m. So it'll be an evening performance. So along the
Happy
same
hour.
happy hour, exactly. Along the same theme of drag. So next week, our 1 o'clock installment is going to be a look into the culture and world of drag entertainment. So we're used to seeing and hearing about drag queens. We're actually going to have 2 drag kings that will share stories about being in the drag culture. Their names are Jota and Luke Modello. They're going to put on a little skit for us. They're going to talk about drag families and drag culture and just what the world of drag is like, which is such a huge aspect of queer or gay entertainment. So hope you'll be there next Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and special thanks to our panelists.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Catherine.
Great fun. Thank you for inviting me.
It was great to get this off my chest.
Rock on, Eddie.
Really.
Whose chest? Whose chest are you talking about? Looks like Marilyn's to me.
Nice.
Looks queer to me.
The best hat.
Really good one. Yeah. So stay in touch, Eddie. I'll come down and see you in the
Absolutely.
city.
It's such a pleasure
I
meeting
hear
you.
more stories from Chuck.
Yeah, really.